Good afternoon, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your evening update on Tropical Cyclone Alfred, now nearing Category 3 status, well out to sea in the Coral Sea. This is a threat to Queensland and certainly a storm that I would be taking quite seriously now if I lived on the Queensland coastline. It's a significant tropical cyclone in the making here, and there's still quite a lot of uncertainty in regards to where this system is going to be going, but for those in Queensland, certainly now time to pay attention to this tropical cyclone. All the latest information coming up in today's evening forecast update on this storm. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing and also consider becoming a channel sponsor today by clicking the join button down below. Let's just get stuck straight into things with Tropical Cyclone Alfred. Like I said, raging now out to sea in the Coral Sea. It is a Category 2 strength tropical cyclone, but likely by the time this video comes out, it will be upgraded to a Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone. It is a significant storm in the making, certainly a lot more intensification still out of this storm, and right now as I look at the satellite picture, it reminds me a lot of Tropical Cyclone Jasper of about 15 months ago, I believe it was. Now, Tropical Cyclone Jasper, of course, had a much better start to life, but in terms of the shape and how this storm has been looking over the last couple of days, it certainly is reminding me quite a lot of Tropical Cyclone Jasper at this time. Further intensification of this tropical cyclone is expected throughout the next 24 to 48 hours before a steady weakening trend will start to kick in. You can see in terms of wind observations along some of the reefs adjacent to the Queensland coastline, wind observations now starting to really pick up. Frederick Reef, 61 kilometres an hour out of the southeast. Those winds are now starting to get quite blustery and approaching gale force, which gives you an idea that this tropical cyclone is now starting to be felt along the Queensland coastline. Now, this is just residual gales streaming into the tropical cyclone, nothing unusual here, nothing too crazy either, but I imagine the next few days, in fact probably the next week or so, is going to be really blustery along the Whitsundays and even down into the central and the south central Queensland coastline, winds averaging between 30 and 50 kilometres an hour, with gusts over the next 3 days expected to be up to about 65 or 70 kilometres an hour in some locations. This tropical cyclone here is not providing impacts to the Queensland coastline right now and is not expected to provide impacts over the next week or so, but it is an interesting forecast and certainly a lot of detail here, so I'm going to be going through all the forecast models, telling you what's expected to happen here, potential impacts of this tropical cyclone, and what's going to be driving this system into the Queensland coastline if it does make a landfall. And I would just like to preface this by saying right now there is no immediate risk to Queenslanders, but certainly a situation where you want to be paying quite close attention now to this tropical cyclone, and certainly a situation where it's still definitely a watch but don't act, but definitely more of a watch right now than it has been over the last couple of days. Let's just jump straight into the forecast and see what's expected with this tropical cyclone. Pulling things back, don't want to spoil too much here. You can see situated as a strong low pressure system, a strong or strengthening tropical cyclone well out to sea in the Coral Sea at this time, and you can see between major forecast models it's a very certain picture over the next couple of days. A steady southward motion is expected, peak intensity likely to be attained sometime tomorrow night and into early Thursday morning as a high range Category 3 strength tropical cyclone. It doesn't really matter how strong this tropical cyclone gets out into the Coral Sea, considering weakening is pretty much guaranteed as it approaches the Queensland coastline. Once we get out to late Friday evening, the forecast does begin to break down in terms of uncertainty. We're going to have a strong high pressure system north of New Zealand here in the Tasman Sea, and this is going to play a major role in directing this tropical cyclone around. Now, if this high pressure system is going to be stronger than what we're expecting, which is certainly a possibility at this time, I mean, major forecast models still a little bit uncertain on how strong this high pressure ridge is going to be, but if we do see a strong high pressure ridge develop over the top of New Zealand, we're going to be seeing this system swung pretty much directly in towards Queensland, not at a fast pace, but it will be moved towards Queensland at a relatively slow motion here, and we'll be seeing a landfall sooner rather than later. However, in an alternate scenario where this high pressure ridge weakens off throughout the remainder of this week and into early next weekend, we'll see, or as you can see here, and we get more sort of low pressure and unstable weather develop into the Coral Sea. That's going to be a bit more difficult for the forecast here. It looks like this tropical cyclone will just meander around adjacent to the Queensland coastline. Right now, it looks like that high pressure ridge is going to be more stronger than not, which means that this tropical cyclone will have a little bit more of a certain future, which is certainly what I'm hoping for in terms of being a forecaster right now. It'd be much easier for all forecasters if we do have that stronger high pressure ridge, and it'll put a lot of the uncertainty to bed as well in regards to this tropical cyclone heading into the Queensland coastline. It's certainly going to make a close approach regardless of how strong this high pressure ridge is going to be, and I do imagine for a brief period cyclone warnings will be necessary along parts of the central Queensland coastline. There's still quite a lot of uncertainty in terms of how bad the impact could be. So I'm going to break that down for you in just a couple of minutes in my personal opinion, but right now, just to look at the forecast models, you can see the East Bev don't really know what to make of this system here. You can see that direct landfall expected around that Rockhampton and Ogmore area on Tuesday the 4th of March rather. I'm living in the past apparently, and that is a very likely scenario at this time here. You can see, or from the GFS forecast model rather, it looks like that direct landfall somewhere around the Ogmore or Rockhampton area seems to be the most likely scenario here, with this tropical cyclone just meandering meandering around, then swinging into Queensland as a result of that strengthening high pressure ridge. This forecast makes the most sense out of all of the forecasts that I've seen. I mean, if we cross-reference this with the East Mid forecast and pull it back to the 1st of March, you can see it's a higgledy-piggledy track. It doesn't make sense here. Approaches Mackay, then swings down towards the south, and then swings back up towards the west here, teases Rockhampton with a landfall, and then swings right back out to sea again, and then down towards Lord Howe Island and Norfolk Island. I mean, I can't even make sense of that. I don't know why it would take such a weird higgledy-piggledy track, and the only reason that I can suggest that that's on the forecast is because of the amount of uncertainty just in regards to where this system is going to be going. In other words, strong high-pressure ridge, this system goes into Queensland. Weak high-pressure ridge, this storm gets dragged down the Queensland coastline. It's an uncertain future for the storm, and then gets sucked down towards New Zealand much later on into the forecast period. It's just very hard to tell, and it's probably a bit too early to tell, regardless. In terms of what can be expected here. Other forecast models are suggesting this system to kind of slide around on the Queensland coastline here. You can see the axis taking the system much further out to sea here. Come early March, we're expecting it to swing close to the Queensland coastline here, and then in the first couple of days, by around Sunday or Monday, swinging away from Queensland, swinging back towards Queensland. I mean, it's really hard to make sense of what's expected here, and then swinging finally away in the later parts of the forecast period. It looks like come around Wednesday or Thursday, the 5th or 6th of March, respectively. It finally makes that move away from the Queensland coastline. I mean, I'm really looking out for it in the forecast models here, but yeah, it would be a very weird scenario if we saw a stalling low pressure system / tropical cyclone here this far south along the Queensland coastline. It's not unheard of to see a stalling or very slow moving low pressure system around Mackay or Rockhampton. I mean, that's nothing that would stretch the kind of expected parts of this forecast here, but if we saw a stalling system here around the Lord Howe Island area or just towards the north of Lord Howe Island, that would be highly unusual considering we've got much better and much stronger steering currents in this part of the Coral Sea. So again, I don't really buy into the axis forecast model, not even the Eastern Wave. I really think that this storm is going to have a much more set in stone forward motion, and that leads me nicely on into my personal forecast, which is almost a carbon copy of what the GFS has to say, with just a few interesting takes in terms of intensity. I see no reason as to why this tropical cyclone will stop intensifying over the next 24 hours. It will be slow intensification, but it could get up towards Category 4 status. There's been no major forecast model suggesting Category 4 status at pretty much any point over the last couple of weeks. So again, it'd be a hard ask for this system to get up towards Category 4 strength tropical cyclone status, but Category 3, Category 4 strength, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be at a very predictable intensity, with peak wind gusts up to about 200 kilometers an hour expected as it moves through the Coral Sea. I'm pretty sure the majority of islands, especially around sort of the Frederick Reef and then up towards, Marion Reef here, I'm pretty sure these islands here are uninhabited. If they were, or if you're on a boat around these islands or coral shoals, I'd recommend getting closer to the Queensland coastline or just booking it out of this area right now, because it could still be a relatively strong tropical cyclone as it passes through this part or the outer reefs of the Coral Sea. But once it gets closer to the Queensland coastline, which it will start lining up, I guess, a final approach sometime on the 2nd or the 3rd of March, it will start to weaken off again with this high pressure system here, which could be quite strong around Lord Howe Island and Norfolk Island, just outside of New Zealand. It'll be pushing in quite a lot of wind shear into this part of the Coral Sea here, and while sea temperatures will be good, it looks like wind shear will disrupt the organisation of this tropical cyclone. Not only that, but it looks like all the major forecast models are also suggesting this tropical cyclone will get a bit bigger in size after a couple of eyewall replacement cycles over the next few days, which means that this tropical cyclone will obviously struggle with putting on knots at a rate of knots. It will likely be a much weaker system here, and then as it gets closer to the coastline, those sea temperatures will begin to fall off a little bit there. They're only about 27-28 degrees Celsius offshore from Rockhampton and Yeppoon, I guess. Still very warm and certainly enough to sustain a strong tropical cyclone, but again, 28 degrees Celsius, this system here will be making the absolute most of the fuel to hold on to its intensity. So I'm not really hopeful for this tropical cyclone to come ashore as a very significant tropical cyclone impact, which is why I'm so comfortable in kind of taking a back seat here and saying that the forecast is very uncertain and not really giving specifics and more sort of an iffy buddy wishy-washy forecast, because we really don't know, to be honest, and I don't feel any pressure to be giving a rock solid forecast right now that could be wrong, just considering the fact that if this tropical cyclone does come ashore, especially for any location south of Mackay, it won't be anything record breaking or historic. It will be a weaker tropical cyclone, especially if it does make that landfall or close pass a lot further south, especially south of Rockhampton. It shouldn't be any stronger than a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone, and then anywhere north of Rockhampton, a Category 1 or 2 really doesn't bother them that much. The chances of a severe tropical cyclone landfall right now very, very limited indeed, and even a tropical cyclone landfall right now, I'd only be giving it at around 10%. Of course, the chances for that will rise significantly over the next couple of days as we start to see a little bit more certainty. I would just like to see two forecast models agree with each other pretty much perfectly tomorrow. I mean, if that happens, I'll be very confident in saying what's expected at this point, but just considering that the three major forecast models for Australia are saying three completely different things, both in terms of track, intensity, landfall, rain, rainfall, everything, you name it, they're saying 3 completely different things. It makes my job very, very difficult as a forecaster to say exactly what is expected here. But again, my personal take on it, which is more of a hunch as opposed to a proper forecast right now, but it is backed by the forecast models and also atmospheric and thermodynamic conditions, is a weak tropical cyclone landfall sometime between the 3rd and the 5th of March. I'm starting to narrow down my days a little bit, somewhere between Mackay and Rockhampton, most likely closer towards Rockhampton, could even be a little bit further south of Rockhampton at this time. But again, we're looking quite far into the future, still about a week away, so plenty of time for the forecast models to refine themselves just a little bit more at this time. Historically speaking, the GFS is by far the most accurate forecast model, especially for track. In terms of intensity, it can get things quite wrong here and there, but in terms of track forecast, the GFS is very rarely a letdown for Queensland especially, so I do have a high degree of confidence in the GFS forecast, which is why I'm basing my personal forecast on that right now. What does this mean for Queensland? Now, for residents between Townsville right down towards the northern areas of the Sunshine Coast, that includes Hervey Bay, Bundaberg, Gladstone, Agnes Water, Rockhampton, Yeppoon, Mackay, the Whitsundays, and up towards Bowen and even Townsville, certainly keep watching this system quite closely over the coming couple of days. Stay up to date with the Bureau of Meteorology, stay up to date with your favourite forecasters on Facebook and YouTube. Definitely stay up to date with the CyclonesOZ channel by subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. But yes, stay up to date with the situation here. Check the weather, check the forecasts quite closely, but do not prepare until at least Thursday or Friday for this system. We still don't know the ifs and buts and the ins and outs of this system and where it's going to be making landfall and what impacts can be expected. There's just no way to tell right now, and there's not going to be a way to tell until we get a couple of days of certainty and congruency between the forecast models, which at earliest will happen on Thursday and probably a bit closer towards Friday or Saturday. I can guarantee you by Saturday we'll know exactly what's going to happen in terms of this tropical cyclone here. So again, even though it's going to be a weak tropical cyclone, it'll probably only take about 24 hours to prepare for this tropical cyclone adequately with your cyclone shutters, pruning down loose trees and tree branches, getting your shopping ready and your cyclone supplies ready. I really don't foresee this being a massive tropical cyclone impact, which is again why I'm taking a backseat in the forecast right now, just kind of letting it play out and see what happens here. But yeah, there's no need to prepare, there's no need to panic, there's no need to prepare anything for this tropical cyclone right now. Just make sure you are watching the forecast quite closely. For those in Rockhampton, Yeppoon, Gladstone and Agnes Water, I imagine there's a lot of talk in those communities right now of a tropical cyclone coming your way, and it's valid talk. It's based off some pretty respectable forecasts right now. So again, certainly keep watching the forecast quite closely. You may have a tropical cyclone coming your way, but it is imperative that you stay calm and cool and collected in a situation like this. Panic just creates more problems than it does good for these communities. So again, it's going to be a weak tropical cyclone. There's not too much to worry about for this system, even though it's your first tropical, or it could be your first tropical cyclone. There's plenty of advice and very good advice out there on how to prepare adequately for a system like this. So again, watch but don't panic, and that is my message of the day, and that's my message for the week here on the CyclonesOZ channel. A very important one, that's for sure. In terms of potential impacts, like I've said, it's way too early to tell, but if this system does come ashore as a tropical cyclone, rainfall accumulations between 300 and 500 millimeters can be expected. You can see the GFS forecast model calling for rainfall blobs outside of Rockhampton up to about 250 millimeters, and I'd like to say that the GFS often dramatically underestimates what numbers in terms of the rainfall can be expected, so it will likely be a pretty wet tropical cyclone just considering its size and its slow-moving nature if it does approach or make a landfall. That's the one thing that I can say for certain right now, is that between Mackay down towards Hervey Bay, if this tropical cyclone does get close to the coastline, there will be lots of rainfall to talk about, and especially concerning around the Pioneer and the Proserpine rivers and even the Burdekin River right now. There's a lot of water in those catchments. There's also a lot of water in the catchments heading in towards Rockhampton, so anything over about 300 millimeters will actually be quite problematic. It's still too early to tell exactly what numbers can be expected, but if you live in a flood-prone area, this is a very serious situation now, and certainly one to be taken quite seriously. But that's only if you live in an area that's prone to flooding even on minor flood days, or even if it's below flood levels, which is quite uncommon over in Queensland. They know exactly how to prepare for floods up there and know exactly where to build as well. Floods are nothing out of the ordinary for Queensland, that's for sure, especially at this time of the year. I would just like to finish this video off by saying watch but don't panic. It might be a daunting situation, it might be a scary one for some of you, but again, this is one to be taking seriously at this time, but certainly not one to be panicking over and worrying the entire family or the entire community. It is a strong tropical cyclone, but take a look at it. It is still days away from a Queensland landfall and absolutely no significant threat to land at this point. Make sure you are staying safe, staying cool, calm and collected over the next couple of days. I want to say a special thank you to everybody that's joined the channel recently and joined the channel sponsor sponsorship program as well, click the join button down below. I'd love to have your support and company over there. I'm thinking of really expanding the program as well and actually having some decent member perks. I mean, just a shout out at the end of the video. It's not that much and definitely not bang for your buck, that's for sure, but it really helps out with all the software here, so I really appreciate it. And that's the only method to financially support the CyclonesOZ channel. So again, thank you so much to everybody that's got themselves over there, and to all the recent subscribers as well. I welcome each and every one of you. That's all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.